but reflecting at the same time on the passing of former Chief Justice Pius Langa. With me now is the Judge of the Supreme Court of Appeals, that's Justice Azar Cachalia on the line. Azar, good chatting to you. Hi.
Hello, Ashraf. Good morning.
Yeah, but again, it's said, I should say good morning, but that's almost the wrong thing to say, isn't it? Because, I mean, you must be particularly saddened about this when someone who's left such a mark, and a colleague as well, now has passed on.
Yeah, no, it's a sad occasion. He suffered in recent times. He wasn't well. And perhaps just some relief from him suffering. Because he really wasn't well at the end.
Mm-hmm. It's a good point. I mean, how much of an impact has he made? You know, we know it on the outside, but say within the legal fraternity. I mean, give us an insight into that.
Well, look, one needs time to reflect on that. This has just happened.
Yeah.
But, in my own experience, with him, that Pius Langa was a soft-spoken man, a fierce critic of apartheid and the apartheid regime, very dedicated at the time, a very dedicated human rights lawyer in the 1980s, and then I think a good judge and a thoughtful Chief Justice. He, of course, made a very important contribution, as you heard from Mantasat Sedu, to the fight against apartheid, and of course, few people have been able to do both things, both make a considerable contribution to the fight against apartheid and to building a post-apartheid society, his contribution, of course, being in the judiciary. I mean, I worked with him in the 90s. At the time, he was the president of the National Association of Democratic Lawyers, and I was one of its two vice presidents. So, we were friends, we were both political activists, and finally we worked together as judges, him in the Constitutional Court and me first as a High Court judge and then as a judge in the Appeal Court.
Mm-hmm. And what was he like as a friend?
He was very, very soft-spoken. I think I'm given to expressing sort of my views very, very loudly and sometimes causing some discomfort. He, I think, was perhaps a bit more reflective. I think he approached his job in that way, in a reflective way, as a conciliator. He avoided confrontation, and I think it would probably be accurate to say that I think he followed in his tenure after on the footsteps of Chief Justice Arthur Chaskalson, where I think there was a high degree of perhaps consensus in the judiciary and the profession at the time. In fact, I think it would be true to say that at the time the judiciary enjoyed a high level of unity, not only in the judiciary but also in the legal profession. Yes.
If we're, and the point you make is well taken, that I'm sure you would, as you continue with your work today or this evening, sort of reflect on exactly what he's done. But if there are, just one or two things that you think in terms of his career where he absolutely made a mark, what would they be?
Well, I think we're all looking for sort of the quick soundbite and the one-liners. I mean, I want to resist that. I think, in an area like the judiciary, in some ways it's important that you almost don't get noticed and that you get along with your work. I think you will speak to Justice Yacoob later, but in the way they work in the Constitutional Court, like in the Appeal Court, is you make a contribution not only to the judgments which appear in your name, but the judgments that others write too, and that often the judgments reflect a view of the court rather than the view of an individual. And I think that so it was in some ways his quiet leadership rather than screaming from the rooftops, which made him, I think, an effective Chief Justice.
Well, I mean, that's a soundbite in its own right, I can tell you that. So let's leave it at that. Thanks so much for your time. And it's certainly a time to reflect, as you said, as you probably will do throughout the day as well. Thanks for your time. There you are, the Judge of the Supreme Court of Appeals, Justice Azar Cachalia, reflecting again on the loss, the sudden loss. Well, I mean, the man was very, very ill, but the passing suddenly is particularly sad. I'm talking about Pius Langa, if you just have tuned in, the second Chief Justice of Democratic South Africa, and also part of the Press Freedom Commission, where he chaired it very much, I think, in his retirement to a degree. Let's bring in the third guest now, and that is Justice Zach Yacoob, who's also retired, in fact, retired judge of the Constitutional Court. Justice Yacoob, good chatting to you. Hi.
Hello, how are you, Ashraf?
I'm good. Well, the last time we chatted under very, very different circumstances. I know that, right? How
Absolutely.
News of the loss of former Chief Justice Pius Langa, how do you take that in?
Oh, I think it's a great loss. He had a great deal to offer to this country still. His wisdom was supreme in a way. He understood life, he understood humanity, he understood human beings. He was utterly committed to the values of our Constitution and would defend it with everything he had. But yet, not in an arrogant way, but always in a very humble and very firm way. And I think we needed someone like him to stay in South Africa with us, help us, advise us for many years to come.
Because interesting, I mean, you've said so. Azar Cachalia said the same thing, and then before that, Matata Tsedu effectively saying the same thing. He was a man very much in an absolute leadership position, and often we think of people like that as being loud, as being aggressive and abrasive, and certainly wanting to make their presence felt. And he was more reflective as a personality. How important was that in terms of his position? I'm talking now post 1994.
Sorry?
How important was that? That means his personality, this reflective mind, right? In terms of the changes in the judiciary post 1994.
I think that his constructive spirit was extremely important for us, and he didn't make his presence felt deliberately, but his presence was felt. He always had good ideas. He was able to bring people together. He was able to talk to them. He was able to get the best out of people in the way in which he worked with them. And that's the reason why he was able to contribute to the judiciary as a whole, to its development, to the law of our country, and also to the humanity of many human beings.
Well, what for you, if you reflect on him in terms of his career, right, probably the greatest mark he's left, amongst his greatest achievements?
Really, his life was a continuum of greatness. He was an important person in the struggle against apartheid. He risked linking with the African National Congress at a time when the African National Congress was banned in our country. He fought against apartheid both as a lawyer and as a human being. He showed a great deal of courage during that time, without bluster, but wonderful courage anyway. His contribution to the National Association of Democratic Lawyers is legend. So is his contribution to constitutional ideas and his contribution in our courts. He's really led a life from the time I knew him of courage, of deep humanity. In fact, he lived out the values of our Constitution, I would say.
Living out the values of the Constitution. What was it like, away from public office as a colleague? Because inevitably, I would think many of you would spend lots of time working and consulting, lots of time sharing, away from the courts, just talking to each other.
Well, he was a wonderful human being. He had a great sense of humor. He participated in discussion. He always was warm. He made you feel good about yourself, which was good. And that was so, whether you related to him personally or whether you related to him professionally, there wasn't much difference there. But his sense of humor always shone out when one was with him in his personal capacity.
And, as a country, as now we reflect on, suddenly at the time of passing, you do reflect on his greatest achievements. You've really made that his life was this continuum of greatness, and it's a lovely way to put it and understand that, right? But if there's one thing that ultimately would define the work and his contribution to the judiciary, that would be what?
I think he's caring for humanity and his own heartfelt suffering about the suffering of other human beings.
Is there an anecdote you can share with us, maybe about him, either while you observed him or interacting with him?
Not that I can think of now. It's very difficult to think of an anecdote.
I would suppose, maybe you've done this already, maybe you'll do it just now, talking to fellow colleagues about this. I suppose there's a deep sadness over the entire fraternity, right? The legal fraternity, reflecting on the passing of Pius Langa.
Yes, we have indeed lost a great man.
What's the best way for South Africa to honor him?
The best way for South Africa to honor him is to understand that we all have a contribution to make towards achieving the constitutional project. For us to understand the humanity of others, for us to teach other people to understand the humanity of others, and to make a contribution towards achieving true non-racialism and true non-sexism in our country. In other words, if all of us, instead of relying on others to do things, lived out the values of the Constitution in a real way, then and only then will we be able to be paying proper tribute to him.
Any idea at this point in time in terms of funeral arrangements? Do you know much about that?
No, nothing at all.
Still very early indeed.
I would imagine the state will be involved.
I would think so too, indeed. Okay, let's leave it at that. Thanks so much for your time, Justice Zach Yacoob, retired judge, in fact, but sad time to talk to you as well as we reflect on the passing of the second Chief Justice, or former Chief Justice in this case, of South Africa. That's Pius Langa, sadly passing away